I'm Charles Canfield, chairman of the board here at the Santa Cruz Boardwalk.
Do you remember your first Aero ride?
Yes, I do. The first one was a kiddie boat ride, and it was built for us here, and it's still running. It's 60-some years old now, and has quite a bit of time on it.
Did you used to ride that?
I was a little too big at the time.
Why were Aero rides so attractive to people in the industry?
Well, they were on the cutting edge. Once they got into the tubular track, they became very good at building roller coasters, monorails, and then they developed the log flume, which had a lot of capacity, and they branched out from there.
Why did you purchase an Aero ride?
Well, they were close. They were right over the hill from us, and my father's the one that purchased the rides, not me. I was quite young at the time, and they were just good manufacturers and good people to deal with. Well, my father worked with Ed Morgan, and the two of them were good friends, and they just did a lot of, conversation back and forth and figured out how to put rides in down here. My father was expanding the park to the lower end in the early 60s, and that's when they really got together. They built the cave train and Autorama together.
Had your father known Ed before?
Yes, he did.
Business related? Do you know how they met or what the relationship?
I really don't know how they met, other than being in the same industry. And my dad was trying to create some new attractions, and the two of them got together and came up with the development of the Autorama and putting this cave train. They were the two big main rides for the lower end, and then we filled it in with other ones.
So those rides were not like bought off the shelf. Those were collaborations between the Boardwalk and Aero.
That's correct. Actually, we helped Ed and Aero develop the first Autorama with a guide rail on it. And after that, they sold quite a few of them, because the old Autoramas were free driving and they were hard to control. They get all jammed up, and it was pretty tough to operate.
This isn't on the list, but there's obviously a connection with Disneyland here, and I wonder if you could maybe just talk real briefly about the connection with Autorama and Autopia and visits from Disneyland, and were you around for that and that kind of stuff?
Well, I knew Walt was coming up, and I kind of forget exactly. He was looking at the Autorama, the center guide rail, and then he was looking, we had a Wild Mouse back then, and he was working on the Space Mountain, or a coaster in the dark, so to speak, and he was just exercising his imagination, and came up and looked at what we had, and then went back and built what's there today. Or I think it's still there today.
The center rail was a big innovation that you guys had come up with.
Well, we knew there were problems. My dad went around looking at a lot of parks, and they all had problems with their Autoramas. And so he was talking with Ed, maybe we could eliminate some of that, make it easier on the operational side. And I think Ed said, well, we could do a center guide rail, still give them the freedom of driving to a limited extent, and eliminate a lot of that, and that's really what happened.
Did Aero feel different from other amusement companies? Why or why not?
Well, I think Aero was different because they were innovators. The other ride manufacturers are innovators too, but they were still building rides for the fairs and parks. And Aero was building individual rides to fit the setting of whatever the park wanted. And I think that's a real big difference.
Why did you decide to build a log ride of all places on the beach?
Well, that's a good question. Simple answer. Great America opened, I think in '75 or right around there. And they put in 2 log rides. And since we're only 30 some miles apart, we looked at their park to see what they had that we didn't have, and a water ride was one. So that's when we decided to see if we could get one, worked in here.
What sold you on the log ride? I guess you kind of...
Well, the competition. We thought, well, we didn't know what the effect would be on the park when they opened. And the year they opened, we were about flat in our revenue. And then we went after the log ride. It opened a year or 2 later, and our revenue went up about 25% that year. It was a big jump.
What challenges were you faced with in putting a log ride in that location?
Well, it was a real challenge. The problem we had was we don't have much land here. So the only way we get a footprint big enough was to go across the Southern Pacific Railroad track. And we didn't think that would be a problem because we lease the right-of-way, and if you keep a certain height, you're all right. So we had the ride all completely designed, ready to go, and we submitted it to the railroad, and they said no. And it really took us back. So fortunately, by then, Aero had been acquired by the Denver Rio Grande Railroad. And so it's amazing. The attorneys from the Denver Rio Grande called the attorneys at Southern Pacific, and all of a sudden it was all taken care of because they wanted to make the sale.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, that was just a stroke of luck on our part.
Why did you decide to get the cave train?
Well, this was all done under my father's leadership, but we had this big space underneath the boardwalk that they created, and they tried to figure out some conveyance or a ride that would go down there, and a train seemed to be ideal. So Aero said, we can build your train, and that's what happened. We built the train and then made a dark ride out of it.
Was the initial cave train filled with the special lighting, or was the very first version just more dark than it was?
Well, the first version version is just about like what it is today. I mean, it's black light, nothing too fancy, not anything over the top in electronics. So yeah, it's just kind of a funky old dark ride.
Did the original cave train have the revolving tunnel?
Yes, it did.
It did.
I think Aero actually built that tunnel for us at the time.
Could you talk a little bit about what happened when you guys announced that, well, we're going to take out the cave train now?
Well, we did a big change down in that area a number of years ago, and we thought, well, we'd just do away with the cave train because it took up an awful lot of area down there. So when the word got out, some of the public found out that we were going to eliminate the cave train, and they became pretty possessive of keeping it. So we decided to put it back in. We shortened the track a little bit, but it's the same old ride.
What was the type of changes that were being done that necessitated your original idea of removing it?
Well, we took out the Autorama because the problem, we're always tight on real estate. And the Autorama was very difficult to work around because you can't get across the track very well. You had to go up and down and handicap and all that kind of stuff. So we took that out and then just reconfigured the whole lower end.
Okay, got it. If you could still buy an Aero ride today new, what would you get?
Well, I'd certainly like to have one of the roller coasters, and I'm sure they'd be a lot different than they were, you know, back when they were building them. But we just don't have the space. So, and who knows what other rides they would have developed, but they were always a superb manufacturer, well-built equipment, and great people to deal with.
What is the ultimate legacy of Aero development?
Well, I think their development of the Corkscrew roller coaster was probably one of the finest things they did. They made different types of coasters also, but being able to develop that and design all the equipment necessary to build it set the stage for what's going on today in the roller coaster phenomena.
Do you also, if you could, do you want to briefly mention or talk a little bit about, you said earlier you rode it in Mountain View. Could you maybe say a few words about that or mention the fact that you rode it there?
Yeah, Aero was developing the Corkscrew coaster, and I'd go over with my dad periodically because they were working on things for us. And when they finally got it up and running in their park, or in their yard, I went out and rode it, and it was a pretty smooth ride then, and I thought it was a pretty neat ride. So I was just salivating that we could get one here, and but we just never had the space or the ability to do that.
Did your dad ever ask you, so is this the ride you want, Charlie? Yes or no? And then you said yes, and you got the ride?
No, he never quite said, would you like this one? He worked them out, and but I had the fortune of going with him on a lot of these trips and listening to him talk to other park people. And I always remember back on the Autorama, there was one park back east that had put one in, and the park owner thought it'd be smart to put a rough track in, and simply because he thought the cars need more traction. And he was telling my dad, I said, that's the dumbest thing I ever did. He said, we're going through tires every few weeks, and he said I had to tear all that concrete out and put a smooth track in. And those are the little things you learn as you go along and talk to people, and you don't make very expensive mistakes. Yeah, we're actually voted the #1 seaside amusement park, so we'd definitely like to have any of you out watching this or hearing about it come by and see us and see some real original Aero development rides. They're still running, and there are 3 of them here: the log flume, the cave train, and the little boat ride. And they're all over 50 years old now and doing very well, and happy to have you come see us.